We have heard from J.D. and Quinn. We have heard from four good friends, men who have known Don in different ways for a long time. They have described to us an unusual person who was bright and curious and sensitive. Quinn has used the word spiritual, perceptive, patriotic. The word passionate was used, hardworking, principled. The word dignity was used, sometimes in your face, maybe often in your face. And someone who always was thinking about ideas. This quiet giant, as Will said, was a remarkable person who loved his family and cared about his friends and appreciated the good companionship and care which Rachel Pearsall gave to him during the last difficult months. We've heard there are many dimensions of Don, always interested in sports and the outdoors and his dogs. Didn't know about the cat. And beautiful music, whether it was Pavarotti or Dave Brubeck or Willie Nelson. And quiet reading, as Doug said, of every kind imaginable. And art, particularly Robert Butler and the Highwaymen, who recorded Florida's outdoors in their paintings. If you bought all the books that Don Porter suggested you might read, it would require at least one extra shelf. And that shelf would include military history and sports biographies and philosophy and science fiction, and always Patrick Smith's A Land Remembered, everyone's favorite book about Florida's pioneer history, to which Don felt such a connection. As an aside, it was Don who arranged for Patrick Smith to give his permission to the Tampa Bay History Center to use Smith's book title and its themes in the History Center's Pioneer Florida exhibit. Don's very diverse library, which has been referred to several times, included a book entitled Genesis Revisited, the first chapter of which begins, of all the mysteries confronting mankind's quest for knowledge, the greatest is the mystery of life. Don thought a lot about life, and he felt sometimes that he saw things that others did not see. And instinctively but proactively, as again we have heard several times today, he spent so much of his life trying to prepare for what was yet to come in his life. J.D. Quinn, Mike, Doug, and the two Wilms have given us some insights about Don through their stories, in which were mentioned many times the smart, savvy, and tough Wiregrass Porter. And one reference was finally made to the sweet Martha Porter, his mother, who was a Christian woman who loved her boys and had to if she was going to cook on a Coleman stove for 3 years. But supplementing Mike Gramling's stories of Don's early life, Don did tell me this one of two that I will mention. During Don's early years, when Wiregrass was trying to teach Don to be a pitcher, and a good pitcher, not just any pitcher or another pitcher, Wiregrass would hold up a catcher's mitt and tell Don to throw the ball into his mitt. Don would often miss and often hit Wiregrass. Wiregrass wouldn't budge, and he sure wouldn't move the mitt. And he would let fly a few of those expletives, which we've learned does not shock us, and say, "Do it again." I don't know how many thousands of balls Don had to throw to learn to get that ball into his father's catcher's mitt, but I would submit to you he learned that lesson very well, and the discipline that went with us. The other story, while at Ole Miss, Don has told some of us, and Willie Roberts tells his story better than I do. Don had, and I'm serious in this, a near-death experience when he became very ill, perhaps due to a bee sting to which Don was highly allergic. Don's heart stopped briefly, and Don believed he had just a glimpse of what we might call the other side. He never forgot that experience, and eventually he felt pretty good about that experience. So I believe when Don left us last week, I think he was more prepared than most of us would be for that other side. Back in the 1950s, there was a beat poet in San Francisco, in those days, where else, whose name was Lawrence Ferlinghetti, referred to by one reviewer as having a wonderful eye for meaning in the commonplace. Having a wonderful eye for meaning in the commonplace. Now, doesn't that sound like the Don Porter we knew? Some of Ferlinghetti's poems were compiled in a small book entitled A Coney Island of the Mind. And Don's all-time favorite Ferlinghetti poem was simply titled, I Am Waiting. It was a critique in Ferlinghetti's style of America at that time, and Don and I referred to that poem dozens of times over the next 40 plus years as we discussed, as Don did with so many of you, the complicated happenings and trends in the nation and the world. Don especially liked the several words that often ended the stanzas in that poem. Words which seemed to express how much he wished solutions could be found to certain trends that neither of us thought were positive. And the words that ended those stanzas were, I am perpetually awaiting the rebirth of wonder. I suggest Don has to wait no longer, because in leaving us, he has finally found his rebirth of wonder. May he and Luana walk together in peace. Well, that concludes the service, and let me tell you what's going to happen now.